Hey everyone, welcome to Remap. My name is Jared, and today we're going to be taking a look at Spider-Man Miles Morales by Insomniac Games. So, after spending a few dozen hours in Ghost of Tsushima, I felt I needed a nice change of pace, and that jumping back into Insomniac's world would be a great option. You can only take so much doom and gloom, the Mongols are invading, my whole family's dead. You can only take so much of that. I needed something a little more lighthearted. So I was a huge fan of Spider-Man 2018 on the PS4, and I was looking forward to seeing what Miles Morales would bring to the table. But this is going to be a spoiler-free review in terms of the story, and as always, before we get started, these are my opinions and mine alone. So when you boot up the game for the first time, you're given a choice for the graphics mode. I was fortunate enough to play on the PS5, so I had these options. I recommend, playing this game on this PS5 if you have one. PS4 is surely going to be great, but this option on the PS5 is incredible. It's very simple what you do when you boot it up. You put it on Performance RT for ray tracing, and you forget about it. With that out of the way, the game is gorgeous. Swinging through a crisp, detailed New York City skyline has never looked so good, and if we're being honest with ourselves, it looks better than New York City in real life. It truly does look incredible. Especially because the ray tracing that I'm talking about is more than just a gimmick, in my opinion. A lot of times when you hear these newer console games come out, so, we have ray tracing. You maybe notice it once, you maybe not even notice it. With quality enough lighting, you say to yourself, ray tracing doesn't even matter. It was executed beautifully in Miles Morales because when you're running along or swinging by these huge glass skyscrapers, you can actually see the accurate reflections. This isn't a game where I'm just walking around in a forest. I'm by these giant panes of glass, these sheets of glass for the whole game, and you actually notice some real live reflections, and it looks incredible. But you really have to play on the performance mode for the frame rate, because once you start swinging around at 60 FPS, there's no going back. This has quickly become a theme in my next-gen reviews across the last year or so. But it's just such an improvement on the previous generation of consoles, because 60 FPS just looks and feels better than games that I know I and many others grew up with, especially in a fast-paced game like Miles Morales where you're swinging through the city. The mechanics just feel so much more fluid at this frame rate. And while I'm still talking about the visuals, I was really impressed by all the character models. Everyone was super expressive, and conversations carried much more weight with the detail and animation quality of their faces. Now, I know I touched on it with the frame rate discussion, but the game ran super well. Glitches and bugs were extremely rare, and I never had any crashes or checkpoint issues, which was something I was a little worried about with a game that's heavily invested in autosave like Miles Morales. And in terms of audio, I thought the voice acting was really solid. The great animations that I mentioned definitely helped, but all the characters were played well, and in a game like Miles Morales that takes place in, a quote-unquote real-life version of New York City, the great voice acting and great animation made the characters much more believable. But probably my most controversial opinion is that the soundtrack was actually really disappointing. It's not actively bad, but there was just so much potential here that I felt like was wasted, because there's no real development or repetition of musical themes, which I always think is necessary in a story-driven experience. If I take a look at my favorite songs from the game, two of them are at the very end, which are Where We Come From and I'm Ready. They're great songs, and I even enjoy listening to them outside of the game, but they don't give me any emotions from the game. They just feel like great songs that were put into the game, not necessarily built around it. I never felt that there were any themes for characters or locations that were developed. The closest thing to that was the main menu theme, which it's awesome, and I wish they used it more. Because when I hear songs from Ghost of Tsushima, The Outer Wilds, or Persona 5, they give me an emotional response. And the Miles Morales soundtrack just didn't do that for me. And I put this blame squarely on the fact that all these great songs are played during cutscenes. it's a lot harder to build a connection to the music when you're not playing the game during it. You're not building that connection, that emotional response to what's going on in the game. It's just like a movie, which doesn't have the same impact as being involved in the action like a video game. And it doesn't help that when they finally let me swing around when a song was playing, it wasn't even an original song for the game. The song On My Own by Jaden, which I'd listened to years ago when I found out WoW is in the game. It's a great song, it works perfectly in the game, but it's a problem that the highlight of the game musically is a song not even built for the game. And this is the connection that I was really hoping to get out of this soundtrack. It's great music, just not a great soundtrack. And moving on, I know I briefly mentioned cutscenes with the soundtrack and animations, but please be aware that there are a lot of cutscenes in this game. This is a game with one clear plot line, and they do as much as they can to get you invested in it. And without any spoilers, it's a solid, fun story that continues where Spider-Man 2018 left off. Is it predictable? Yes, very much so, but I still enjoyed it. It's a more lighthearted Spider-Man story. Obviously there are some stakes here. There's some deep stuff, but this is not coming off Ghost of Tsushima. It's a heck of a lot lighter. And the core gameplay and combat is fun enough to keep you engaged, and I'll never get tired of swinging around the city. It's the highlight of the game, and it stays the highlight all the way through. But the combat's a lot of fun, and Miles' powers add some new twists to it. Although I will say the stealth is pretty lackluster. A good chunk of encounters can be breezed through in stealth because the AI has no idea what's going on. It's pretty unfortunate. But I do want to spend a little bit of time on one of the biggest negatives, and probably the biggest negative of the game, and that's just the lack of content. Because to me, at least, Miles Morales is really in the shadow of Spider-Man 2018 on the PS4. Miles Morales feels more like a DLC than a fully fledged sequel or continuation of the game. Because the map, the gameplay mechanics are pretty much the exact same, but the story is significantly shorter. You can conceivably run through the story in a full afternoon if you're going pretty quickly. And I don't consider a bunch of collectibles, enemy safe houses to be quality additional content when it's just reskins of stuff from the previous Spider-Man game. I feel like a lot of stuff was copy and pasted with a few minor changes. And then there's just not a lot of content here, which is unfortunate. And this all leads me to my rating of Miles Morales. It's a really fun game with an entertaining story and some good characters, but it's short. That's the reality of it. So I'm going to be giving it a B+, because I want to acknowledge that it's a really good game. I had a lot of fun with it, but the lack of content is what's holding it back from that A mark. Now, recommending it is a completely separate discussion, and one that I really had to think about for Miles Morales, because this game retails for $50 on the PS5. $50, and I do not recommend it at this price. For the amount of content you get, that is not worth it at all. I got it on sale for $30, and I still think I paid a little bit too much for only, 10 to 12 hours of gameplay. So my advice is, wait till you can pick up a copy for less than $30, and you're going to have an awesome weekend with Spider-Man Miles Morales. But that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for tuning in. You've been listening to Remap, the gaming podcast. My name is Jared, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.